can one be fully human without experiencing tragedy. The only tragedy there is in the world is ignorance, and all evil comes from there. The only tragedy there is in the world is unwakefulness and unawareness, and from there comes fear, and from fear comes everything else. But death is not a tragedy at all. Dying is wonderful, but it's only horrible to people who have never understood life. It's only when you're afraid of life that you fear death. It's only dead people who fear death. But people who are alive have no fear of death. And one of your American authors has put it so well. The test of your awakening, I don't remember what word he uses exactly, is the depth of your belief in injustice and tragedy. What is the end of the world for a caterpillar is a butterfly for the master. Death is resurrection. But we're not talking about something that will happen, but is happening right now. If you would die to the past, if you would die to every minute, the person who is fully alive is the person who is full of death. We're always dying to things. We're always shedding everything in order to be fully alive and to be resurrected at every moment. Now, the mystics, the saints, and others, their great effort is to wake people up. If we don't wake them up, my dears, we're always going to have these other minor ills of hunger and war and violence, etc., because of the great ill, the great evil of sleeping people, ignorant people. We're always coming up with new schemes, aren't we? There's a great debate going on in India about Mother Teresa's work, because lots of people are saying, what's she doing? She's running an ambulance service for people who are being crushed by an unjust society. You know, imagine a huge factory, and people are getting crushed there, so they're taking these broken bodies and throwing them out the window, and Mother Teresa comes along with her sisters, picks up the body, puts them in an ambulance, and takes them away. We mustn't do that. We got to change the whole system. Is that right? Yeah. Well, wait a minute. I think she's doing a great work because, all right, at least there's somebody to pick up the broken bodies. And they say, rightly perhaps, it's precisely the owners of the factories who are giving her the money to keep the lawn clean. Pick them up. Something there, something. But I wouldn't exclude her work at all. But what exactly do you plan to do now? Take over the factory, huh? Yeah. You know what's wrong with the factory? It's being run by wolves. Are you going to substitute it with another set of wolves? You think changing the system and putting wolves in charge is going to change it? In Mexico, there was a Jesuit who became the treasurer of the province. He says he wrote a note to Arrupe once to ask him about the relative value of communism, socialism, and capitalism. And Father Arrupe gave him a lovely reply. He said, a system is about as good or as bad as the people who use it. You know, people with golden hearts would make capitalism work beautifully. They say, look, I don't want to crush you out of the market. I'll make a little space for you so you can run your little business too, or whatever. But if that doesn't change, if people haven't woken up, meaning they have not become sensitive to reality, then we have tragedy. That's the origin and the root of tragedy. Now, changing. I said to you yesterday, we're talking about people who are always wanting others to change so that they will be happy, remember? And I was saying, don't ask the world to change. You change first. Then you will get a good enough look at the world so that you will be able to change whatever you think ought to be changed. First, take the plank out of your own eye. But if you don't take it out of your eye, you have lost the right to change anyone or anything. Till you are aware of yourself, you have no right attempting to interfere with anyone else or with the world. Now, the danger of attempting to change others and to change things, if you yourself are not aware, is that you may be changing things for your own convenience, your own pride, your own dogmatic convictions and beliefs, or just to relieve your negative feelings. I happen to have negative feelings, so you'd better change so that I'll feel good. First, cope with your negative feelings, so that when you move out to change others, you're coming from love. You're not coming from hate. You're not coming from negativity. You're coming from love. And strange as it may seem, people can be very hard on others and very loving. The surgeon can be so hard on the patient and so loving. Love can be very hard indeed. What does self-change entail? I've said it in so many words again and again, but I'm going to break it down into little segments. First, insight. Not effort, not cultivating habits, not having an ideal. Ideals do a lot of damage. You're the whole time focusing on what should be instead of understanding what is. And so you're imposing what should be on present reality, never having understood what present reality is. Now, insight. Let me give you an example of that from my own experience, counseling experience. There's this priest who comes to me and says he's lazy. He wants to be more industrious, more active. He is lazy. And I say, lazy? What does that mean? Now we're going to get into awareness, into insight. What's he talking about? In the old days, I would have said to him, oh, you're lazy, huh? He says, yes. Well, let's see. Why don't you do this? Why don't you make a list of things you want to do every day? And then every night you tick them off. That'll give you a good feeling. And then, so build up a habit. Or I might say to him, who's your ideal? Who's your patron saint? He says, Saint Francis Xavier. Now see how much that guy worked? You got to meditate on your ideal, and that will get you moving, etc. Now that's one way of going about it, but I'm sorry to say, it's superficial. Making him use his willpower, his effort, etc., doesn't last very long. His behavior may change, but he does not. Let's move in the other direction. I say to him, lazy? What's that? You know, there are about 500 million types of laziness. Let's hear what your type of laziness. Would you describe what you mean when you're talking about laziness? He says, well, you know, I never get anything done. Uh-huh. You don't feel like doing anything. That's right, I don't feel like doing anything. You mean right from the moment you get up in the morning? Yes. He says, you know, I wake up in the morning and nothing worth getting up for. He says, that's right, nothing worth getting up for. You're depressed. He says, you could call it that. I'm depressed. So I've sort of withdrawn. Have you always been like this? Well, not always. When I was younger, I was more active. When I was in the seminary, I was full of life. When did this begin? Oh, about 3 years ago, 4 years ago. Anything happen? He's thinking. Well, if you have to think so much, nothing special could have happened 4 years ago. How about the year before that? What happened? He said, well, I was ordained. Anything happen in your ordination year? No, well, there was a little thing, the final examination in theology, you know, I failed and was a bit of a disappointment, but I've gotten over it, it's all right. What happened? He says, well, the bishop was planning to send me to Rome to eventually teach in the seminary, and, well, I rather liked the idea, but since I failed in the examination, he changed his mind, he sent me to this parish. He said, actually, that was an injustice, because the man on the board, he was, oh, he's getting worked up now. There's anger there. He hasn't gotten over it. We've got to work through that. He's disappointed. It's useless preaching him a sermon. We've got to find out what's happening there. It's useless giving him an ideal. We've got to get him to face his anger, his disappointment, to get some insight into all of that. When he's able to work through that, he's back into life again. If I had only given him an exhortation, if I had said, do you have married brothers and sisters? I do. Do you see how hard they have to work? And you know the trouble with us clergy? We have everything found for, you know, we get our meals. That'll make him guilty. But he hasn't got self-insight, which is going to heal him. So that's the first thing, the marvels of psychological insight. Now, there's a great boon in psychology, great help. Modern psychology is indeed a great help to understand how our emotions keep tying us into all kinds of situations. Not really necessary. It isn't too difficult to unearth his addiction, his attachment. There's another great help, understanding. Did you really think this was going to make you happy? You just assumed it was going to make you happy. Why did you want to teach in the seminary? Because you wanted to be happy. You thought that being a professor, having a certain status and prestige, would make you happy. Would it? Understanding is called for there. Or the other thing that I told you the other day, when I made the distinction between I and me. There's a great help too. Disidentify what's going on. After we've unearthed what's causing your depression, that's not difficult to see at all.